Welcome to Navigating Reality Season 2. We're here at the Lobby Club in Trenton. I want to share something with you all that I've never shared in an opening monologue. This is the first time we're doing an opening monologue. You know, we spend a lot of our lives going through life thinking about, spending time through life going through systems like race, religion, and politics. But what if those systems don't really tell us the full truth? What if those systems really help us think about how to think, opposed to really sharing who we really are? So Navigating Realities really wants to look at that tension, not to solve it, but to explore how we see ourselves versus who we really are. So today I have with me the new president and CEO of the Dodge Foundation, Samra Haider. Glad that you be here today. Glad. Welcome to Navigating Realities, where dialogue meets understanding. So let me ask you this question before we jump into your background a little bit. What is something in the world today that through your life that you thought about, was shaped around, that you're not quite sure that holds true today?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, I think the premise of American exceptionalism, I probably wasn't always raised to think that, but I think more and more that has become something that I don't really think is very true, but it's sort of persistent in this country. And I think it's hard to unwrap this idea of, in America, we're better than so many other people. I don't think that that's actually true. And I think, unfortunately, we're using that kind of mindset to do harm in a lot of parts of this world. So I think that's something it's grown and grown, but at this moment we're in our country, I think that seems pretty strong to me, that we have to be a little bit more humble as a nation and see what's happening around us a bit more.
It's interesting because, not long ago, today is April is the Fair Housing Month, and I was reading Dr. King's speech Beyond Vietnam, and he talked about America really seeing it from the so-called enemy's eyes. Do you think it's hard for Americans to understand that, which we really haven't had war on our soil, right? Do you think it's hard for us to really understand the perspective of people where bombs are being dropped every day? And we remember 9/11, those towers crashing, but what about people who see that and live with that every day? Do you think it's hard for us to really identify with that?
That's such a great question, because I think, first of all, Americans should travel more. They should understand different cultures. But for me, my family's Muslim. I have seen my people kind of been treated as less than, othered. And so for a lot of people, when they think, oh, we dropped a drone in Pakistan or we killed this many people in Gaza, it doesn't mean the same to them as it might be for a different skin-colored child in some other places. And I think for me, that's woven through in my work now with a lot of the systemic racism we have in this country. But for me, yes, I think to answer your question, I don't think people view what we're doing in other places with the same gravity if it was here. And I think if they did, they wouldn't be so cavalier with thinking that these wars are so righteous. I kind of am a strong believer in peace. I'm an anti-violence type person. And so I think that we should really solve problems in a different way. And so I wish people would reach out and travel more and learn more about what's going on in other places. So
let's talk a little bit about your background. You growing up and what helped shape that for you. How did you get into being this anti-violent? Where'd you grow up and where are you from?
I grew up right here in Mercer County. Princeton Junction. I went to West Windsor, Plainsboro High School. My parents are from Pakistan. They came here, but privileged life. They were both PhDs, so in many ways I had a lot of privilege from a class point of view. But obviously at that time, particularly the 80s, there wasn't a ton of people who looked like me in different places. My mom worked in Trenton for the state, so I interacted a lot in Trenton actually. And so I think at a young age, there was an identity that I was not necessarily like everybody else. And so I think I gravitated towards other people or other communities that weren't like everybody else to sort of see at these points of difference that there's a lot of beauty in that. But then over time, high school was great. I actually had a very diverse experience. But then when I went to college, I'm like, whoa, there's a lot of privilege around me. And I took a lot of classes actually in post-colonial studies. So I really learned about this kind of imperialism, colonialism, and then these post-colonial struggles that were very fascinating to me, to see how do you come back from a lot of your country being extracted from, and then how do you think about building a movement that isn't necessarily in response to that, but creates agency for the people around it. And you have seen a lot of post-colonial situations have not been great. So I think that was something that just was really like stuck with me from a long time. And then visiting parts of South Asia, obviously, Africa. Again, when you see poverty in those places and when you see class inequity in those places, it's so extreme that, again, it just made me think, okay, I definitely am privileged, so I have to think about how I'm going to use that privilege to sort of work against these forces that I see in other places.
Was it visiting those other countries? Like, where did that come from? Where did that desire to really, look at or try to figure out ways to address equity? Where did that come from, Samra?
It was a journey, but I would say, like when I specifically went in my junior year of college. So I'd taken all these classes and sort of read all these things and manifestos and this, and then I went there, and it just dawned on me, it's a chance of birth. It was a chance of birth that my trajectory is so different from this child, begging for food. And I don't think at that moment I'm like, yes, I'm gonna work towards equity, but it just was like, I should be lucky all the time. I'm not better than those kids who are asking for money. I just happen to have a different trajectory that had nothing to do with my own hard work. And so I think that just sat with me for a long time, and it shaped the way I think about all people who struggle. Even the people who, a lot of my work, and we can talk about it, was in reentry, people coming home from incarceration. This belief that nobody is beyond redemption. Nobody starts out worse than somebody else at their core, and so we have to work to try to move everybody on an equitable plane, if that makes sense.
How do you think that your work in reentry really helped form some of your thinking about social justice now? Our criminal justice system, our criminal legal system is so just fully steeped in racist sort of slavery-related practices, and it's just moved to the modern day. It's modern day slavery, in my opinion, and I think the way particularly Black and brown communities are policed, the way they're incarcerated, the way they're treated while they're incarcerated, to me it was just so eye-opening that these are human beings, some of whom have done things that are against the law. It doesn't mean you treat them in an inhumane way, and I think for me that work, it was really being around a lot of people who had lived experience, who were gentle, who were caring, who were funny, who had the hopes and dreams that anyone would have, but they had also so much pain and trauma and shame. And I think being around more people and this idea of proximity, it was really important to me, because I view them as my friends. I view them as people I really care about. But I think so often people who are felons or ex-cons are treated again as this other. And so I think this always way that we try to other people, I'm always trying to break down don't other people really bring them in and see how they're more similar to you than different. That's pretty incredible. And now you're in this position now, Samra, that I want to say it's not I want to call it an ivory tower, but now you're in foundation world now, right? You're president and CEO. How do you stay grounded when foundations are in position to help people, but sometimes let me ask you this question: do you think the foundation world actually help people at the times they need it most, or is there stages that the speed of it, that how do you reach people quickly opposed to going through all the steps that you have to go through?
Yeah, it's a good question. And the thing with foundations that I knew when I was in direct service, and I know now, is each one is totally different. It's one of the more unregulated kind of industries, I guess you could say. And I think the intention of most foundations is really strong. I think we get in our way, in all things, when we start to make something really bureaucratic and we lose sight of what are we doing here? Is this about somebody else's money that you didn't make, that you're all of a sudden now feeling like you have to hold on to, or is this about making change? So I do think there's just institutional speed issues with foundations that have been perpetuated over time that we need to change. I would say on the ivory tower piece, it's super uncomfortable for me. I literally, I think over time I just don't really like hierarchy. I don't really like, feeling like because you have more money or you have resources, that you're somehow in a position of power. But at the same time, I don't want to be silly about it. Okay, we do have money. And so it's just trying to be honest about, yes, we have these resources, but I see you. I see you as who you are. I see what you're trying to do, and I want, to the best of my ability, to help you. So I think it's just that orientation. But I told everybody, I told my team, I told anyone, if you start seeing me changing, where I don't, take someone's call, or I don't respond to an email in a certain time, I don't want to become someone like that. And I think, you just have to work hard to stay grounded.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the challenges I think we all face in doing this work, like staying connected to folks who need the things that we're trying to solve, right? Mm-hmm. And in many ways, I think I was watching an interview with Warren Buffett and Jay-Z, and Warren Buffett said he wanted his money spent down in 10 years. Mm-hmm. And the question was, why so fast? He said, because I don't want to create another institution. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts around institutionalizing philanthropy, or what I call institutions that I call them poverty pimps, and I've said this many times. These groups, and I'm well-meaning, are in our communities, right, supposedly helping, but you're just padding more and more and more staff, and the crisis is still there.
Yeah. I mean, that's there's a lot in that, but I think there's a lot of movements to spend money down. Again, the money is whatever. Mm-hmm. I think my concern, particularly with our federal government right now, is, I mean, it's not a lot of money. It can't substitute government, but it might be the only kind of backstop to a government that really cuts spending for public good. So I think that's my only hesitation on fully spending it, but I hear the critiques completely about the need is now, don't hoard your money, give more than 5%, all of that. So it's a balance to try to understand who knows what it's going to be like in 20, 30 years. So maybe it's the conservative part of me is you got to make sure that you're able to support issues that take generations to overcome. But yeah, I think, sorry, the second part of your question was?
No, it's just understanding, and this is a balance and tension that, I think many folks in philanthropy have to manage, right?
Right.
You want to help these organizations that are helping people, but you see that, their staff is growing, but the problem is still there.
Oh, yes. And I think nonprofits, and I say this having worked for many, many years as a direct service nonprofit, they're an industry too, and then it becomes, are you about saving the nonprofit or about the impact? And you start seeing more and more disconnection from the impact, the more entities are involved in the solution. But the upside of that is, there's also, if it's done right, there's a really great way to achieve the impact. So it really is a balance, and I think this is where it's a mix of, I do like to see sometimes data. I want to make sure that we're creating an impact, but I don't want to become then obsessed with that data so that I lose sight of, qualitative impact. So it's you have to really take a fully holistic approach. I don't think it's everybody on the ground knows exactly what the solution is, nor do I think, all the foundations or all the businesses know the solutions. I think the beauty is when you can really get I hate the term collaboration, but when you can actually get real collaboration where you're listening and moving and working things, and that's been a really fun part of the job so far, is seeing the potential for Dodge to play a role in just pushing forward more effective collaboration.
I think that's the key. I think more effective collaboration is something that's needed, because everybody's doing their one-off things, and it's I wonder how foundations see that in terms of really pushing people. You guys are in, I don't want to say the driver's seat, but you can force, hey, you guys need to connect, right? And where do you think, where do you think the role of your background, your growing up, does your faith play a role in why you do what you do? How did that come about?
Yeah, I mean, it is this idea of just you're lucky, you're privileged, you see people around you who look like you, who are oppressed in different ways. And I think in terms of faith, the biggest thing is just everyone's equal. There's no kind of hierarchy in my faith, and the fact that you really have to fight against oppression. That kind of injustice is not something that we want to tolerate, I guess. And so I think that's been the main thing. And a lot of people get rich and then give money. That's great. For me, I'm my biggest asset is probably my ability to work hard, that part of me. And so that's also something, I'm a hard worker. So if that's the best thing I got, then I want to put that hard work to use towards
Where does that hard
those
work
things.
ethic come from?
I don't know. I think it's I just was pretty motivated when I was younger. I think I've, probably most people would say I'm a little type A, a little bit of an athlete. So, I always wanted to kind of push myself and do that. So I probably do skew towards, I work hard, and then other people who work hard, that's sort of where I would gravitate towards.
Outworking people, is it?
Not outworking people, but I respect when people have a hustle, when they work hard, whatever it is they're doing, but when they they're not idle, you know, when they're actually just like moving and moving, keeping things moving. That's kind of how I am.
Was that instilled from your childhood, or was that part
You know, my mom worked, and so I had 2-parent household that both were working, and so I did see like my mom, you know, particularly would come home from the state, pick us up, make dinner. We'd have dinner as a family, and you know, then she'd relax. But like I grew up with a vision of a woman who works and is able to do both of those things, and so I think that it was always like never a question I was going to not work, you know? And so again, it is no knocking anybody who chooses different things. For me, that is a big part of my identity.
Yes, that's pretty interesting. I think we take sometimes, I think about what we take from our parents or what we don't take from our parents and how that shape us as people. And when do we have the time and spend the time really identifying those things that we struggle internally about? What do we want to do in solving problems in life? The systems that we're in, the confines that we're in, and trying to solve those problems.
Yeah.
And what are the things we think about how to work around those, or do we work around those and work through those, or do we move forward, keep pushing forward?
Yeah.
To try to change society.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the funny thing is, while my parents were great, but, you know, they continually are like, why aren't you an investment banker?
Yeah,
why are you not doing this? And like, what do you do again? And like, couldn't you make more money doing this? So there is some times where I'm like, man.
My friends call me Tommy from Martin, like, you don't have a job. It's hard to explain what we do.
I've never had a job in the last 20 years that I could explain to my parents in one sentence. My dad one time was like, this is my previous job. He's like, you know, I heard Oprah Winfrey is helping people from prison. You should give her a call. I'm like, yeah, Dad, sure. I'll give Oprah a call. Just exactly. But yeah, so I think it's, you know, that's why I say it takes time. And anytime, you know, I've had younger staff working for me, it's like, I think that the generation now, there's a tendency to be impatient. And like, you know, I think it's like, sometimes it's not all going to fit right away, but just like keep moving. And like, the more you keep moving slowly toward your destination, it starts to come together, but you don't have to feel like it's all going to come together. Because it didn't for me all at once. It was like a real slow movement.
Yeah, tell me about that movement. Like, what was the process for you?
Oh, well, so I went to college, and again, grew up very privileged, but when I went to college, a lot of people who knew exactly what they wanted to do, had gotten to these private schools. I was like, oh, what do you mean? Like, you already know what you want to do? And so I was an econ major, and I went to school in the city, and so everybody who was an econ major just went into banking or something in finance. I didn't even take one single finance class at college, and then I ended up, you know, getting an offer for investment banking, and I hated it. Like, it was just like, what is this job? Like, I don't even know. So I had also, my senior year, gotten into London School of Economics for a human rights degree. And this is kind of linked to my studies with like post-colonial studies and postmodern stuff. So after a year, I was like, oh, I don't want to do banking anymore. And I was like, let me go to LSE. So I went from banking to going to London and studying human rights, this is where a lot of the like talk about, you know, anti-torture, anti-violence, war is bad, being in Europe where, you know, most European countries have seen war on their soil. So their view, even though they're not, you know, they're not necessarily getting bombs dropped on them all the time, there's a real difference in the way even the most conservative European thinks about war that is different to America. But so I did this great time, one of the best times of my life living in London, and I came back and I'm like, okay, so I have an econ major, I did banking, and now I have human rights, and I could not get a job in the nonprofit space. Now, I tried teaching, I tried nonprofit, they were just like, no. So at that point, I was really like, what am I going to do? And I ended up finding a job in management consulting, which I know a lot of people make fun of it, but it was really a great few years for me because it kind of gave me professional confidence. Like, it was like, okay, I'm good at this, or I'm, you know, pretty good at this, and I can fit, you know, it just fit with me. But, you know, after a while in management consulting, you're like, okay, I don't really care about this airline or this, you know, technology company. So I knew that I wanted to switch into the social impact space at that point, but I was happy with having those years of like confidence built, and then I went to business school, and there I was one of like 8 people who decided to do social impact. Now it's a lot different in business school, but at that time it wasn't. So I really didn't like business school very much, but it helped me pivot into social impact. And again, I thought, I'll just be like the CFO of the Red Cross. Like, I had no idea what you could do with that background, but you know, there was a small but mighty group of people doing different kinds of work, and so I ended up working at a company in San Francisco called Red F, and they help social enterprises. So it's like employment-focused social enterprises. So people who might be involved in the criminal legal system, people who are unhoused, young people at risk, they basically bring them in and they have them work for them. And then they have them, usually get jobs, permanent jobs. And the idea there is it's not just about getting them to work quickly. It's like the idea of work is you're building these pro-social skills that help people, do better and then move on into permanent employment. So Red F was a funder of this type of work. So I worked there for several years in California. And then when I moved back to New York, I took a job for a minute in small business development because I was like, oh, it must be the business thing. That's what I really like about this work. And then I was doing that. I'm like, I actually don't really care that much about the business side of it. I care about the mission. And that is when I reconnected with a group that had been helping people coming home from prison launch in Oakland. And I ended up working there at the Center for Employment Opportunities. And so I got a job there 11, 12 years ago. And my job there was to really scale our work across the country. So not only did I get really steeped in workforce development and reentry, but also just like I got to see the United States, and I got to see cities like Harrisburg and Detroit and Memphis, and just see the ways that they need support, but they also are also unique. And so I really fell in love with just like the country and the people, and then the work we were doing. And
what changed about you going into this work and then coming out of it, seeing it? Like, because we all have a perception about certain things, certain industries, certain people, but then we get into it and it's a whole different story. What changed for you?
I think foundations and everyone's scale. And I say that too sometimes. You're going to give all this money, how many people is it going to serve? And I understand that point, but that's the language of capitalism, more, more, more. And I think what I really learned was like, yes, you need to think about how many people is this going to impact, but if you have that mentality that it's just about numbers, you really lose sight of like, you, Eric, might need my help, and you are a person who deserves time and support and a special connection. And I think prior to coming into the work I was doing at CEO, I probably didn't think that was as important what it is. And so I was always at this tension of like, you need to raise money, you need to show them you can go a lot of places, but CEO ended up being in 30 cities, and at some point I'm like, it's enough. Like, I don't want to be the McDonald's of the reentry space. I want to really take care in the communities we're in to make our outcomes better and to do better work. So I didn't think that I'd want to pivot so much into like the deepness of the impact, but it matters because it's people. Like a lot of this work is people work, and you have to really take a lot of care and time in that. And so that was a change, I think.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that, because I think we started out this conversation how America's never had war on their soil, so don't. But you have a strong sense of seeing the dignity of people, and I'm trying to pinpoint where does that come from, Samra? I say that because we're so caught up many times as American consumerism that it doesn't always register with us all the time. So how do you keep that focus?
Yeah, I think I'm probably a pretty an empath, and I'm very I love people. I love talking to people. I love learning from people, and I think that there's something in me, and sometimes it can be disappointing because people fail sometimes, not everyone is going to have this linear path to perfection, but I do feel
there's such a thing as perfection.
Exactly, but it's I do feel this compulsion to help, and I'm not the best person in the world, but I feel if I can help people that, that, I don't know if that's my worth, I wouldn't go that far, but it's it is a pretty strong connection to how it makes me feel. And so I think that's just something big for me, but you really have to, in order to want to help people, you have to see them, to understand them, and you have to do the work of showing up with dignity.
Yeah, I've learned that over my time, over the years, and I think there were moments in my life that really helped shape that for me. Can you think of any moment that, or specific times that you start to really hone in on that?
In college, a teammate of mine, I was playing lacrosse, teammate of mine passed away, and it was kind of a bad situation. And I remember thinking then that life isn't perfect, and everything's not going to have a perfect reason why something happens, and you have to let go of this idea of perfection, or just that things fall into place the way they should. And I'd seen that before, but that was a very profound moment where I felt that way. And so I think that really turned turned a course for me, that like you have to be able to empathize with people you might not want to empathize with. You have to maybe understand and let go of things that might not be the way you want them to be. So like all these lessons that people learn in different ways, I think I learned them, or I started to learn them quite quickly at a certain age. And I think that that's sort of what stayed with me quite a bit, is like this ability to really try to understand even people you don't want to understand, where they're coming from.
What do you think we are as a country in that space?
Not good. I mean, I think there's a group of people, like probably lots of parts of New Jersey. I live in Brooklyn. Like there's parts that I think are like that. But as a country, I feel like we're kind of mean-spirited a little bit lately. I think we are looking to get mad at people. Even it's cancel culture. Like I watch reality TV and there's some two stars did something and everybody now on the internet is like trying to like get angry at these like two reality stars, and I'm like, oh my God, like it's like a mob, and so I just think there's a natural feeling lately of that we consume things so quickly we don't get deep on anything. And then like not seeing the good in people, not being forgiving, not being empathetic, but actually trying to like cast people out and push people down. And then you see that on a massive scale with our president and the way he kind of dehumanizes people. But I see that even on a more minute micro level, and it makes me sad. Like, people picking on each other, like just like the kindness. It sounds so lame, but it's like we're not kind as a nation in the way that I think we should be. And I think, it's a good feeling to be kind, and it's always surprising to me that people anchor towards vengeance or retribution or these kind of negative things, where I think if you brought out more of the positive things, we'd just be better off.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting you say that, because I struggle with that, thinking about what causes us to do that.
Right.
I think part of, the tension that we wrestle with, and this is what this podcast is about, is like, we're shaped to think we know who we are, but to really get down inside to understand who we really are, that takes time.
Yeah.
It takes some spinning away from, maybe outside of the country, outside of the systems that you're used to being a part of, because they really shape your worldview. And sometimes our worldview is shaped by others and we don't even realize it yet.
Yeah.
And so how do you, what would you say to people who really need to get to know themselves?
Put your phone down, get off the gram, get off TikTok. I mean, I really, and I'm guilty as everybody, but it's like they're controlling us. They're making you care about money and capitalism and more money, and the working man's a fool, and it's all about these shortcuts. Like it's all by design to make us like dumber and care less. And so I do think we have to get back to like breaking bread with your friend, like talking to your neighbor, like reading something, anything. I think it's just like some of these, and I feel like I sound like a grandparent, but it's like it's a little bit like
I'm a grandparent.
But I'm like, oh my gosh, like I force my kids to like play outside, like don't get off your screens and like be in nature, and it's never bad. No one ever regrets going for a walk or going for a run or talking to your friend on the phone. And I just think it's like we just get stuck in this very solitude world, and a world that's fake. So I do think people just need to remember that, and we need to create moments where we're doing that more. Like my office, we do come into work 3 days a week, and I know they're like, please can we work remotely? But I'm a little like, I push back on it a bit, because I'm like, we should be together. We should be out meeting, the community. And like, if you're at home, I know you can do work faster or better, but you're not engaging. And I think something is lost in that.
The simplicity things are very simple, right?
Yeah.
Getting to know, saying hi to people, just speaking to folks, and like getting to know your neighbor or getting to know someone.
Yeah.
Or getting outside of the bubble of meeting people. I know this is hard for us who don't have the same political, religious views, and having a conversation. It's difficult.
Oh, totally.
And I know it's been difficult for me. Have you had that experience talking to folks who are so different from you, and like, why the hell do they think that?
I have, but I do think, and I don't know if it's like, coming as a, from an immigrant standpoint, my parents being immigrants, like it was a lot like assimilate, like don't put your head down and like don't make waves and don't tell them about all these thoughts. So I think there was that almost too much for a while. So I pushed back against that, but I will say I do try to like bring people back, because I think if we're just always trying to make it smaller and smaller, the people that we want to engage with, you're just gonna have a small little group of people. And I'm sure you've read all the articles about how progressives kind of messed that up in the last election where they didn't, and I agree with that. I think it's like, a lot of even the people I work with who came home from prison were like, I don't care if you call me someone with lived experience or returning citizen. Are you going to give me a job? And I'm like, that's true, actually. Like, all these foundations talk about how much the language. But then would you actually hire somebody who had a criminal conviction and didn't go to college? Like, so I think it's like, what are we really talking about sometimes? And I think the only way you know that is if you talk to people and hear what they say. So that part makes me a little optimistic that, like, maybe people aren't as awful as we think or as different as we think if we can kind of understand, like, what's driving them. And I do think, sometimes there's like a line in the sand of like, no, you're racist, you're this, but I think a lot of times they're also programmed in a certain way to other it out. So I'm a big proponent of trying to listen. I mean, in my previous job, we worked in places like Louisiana and Oklahoma, Kentucky, and honestly, sometimes they had much more progressive policies around.
Really?
I mean, maybe progressive isn't the right word, but they were easy to work with sometimes. So it would surprise me a little bit that there was some reforms you'd see that you wouldn't see in like a New York or California. So, I think that there's things that can happen that are positive if you actually try to engage more.
What do you think prevents that from? Let's localize things in New Jersey. What are you seeing in New Jersey that prevents that?
Well, New Jersey, the biggest thing is like we have Newark, but the city, a lot of suburban kind of state, and so you can live your entire life in your suburb, never really engaging, and people aren't walking, they're not interacting, and so I think that's a big one. I grew up in West Windsor, but only because my mom worked in Trenton and my dad had an apartment here, I would go to Trenton. Otherwise, you could literally never set foot in Trenton if you grew up in West Windsor. And that's a problem. And so I think that's something in New Jersey where we pat our backs by being liberal because, we're not wearing MAGA hats everywhere. But at the same time, does it really bother us that there's this inequity in our state? And I think Dodge is very focused on that. Yes, it's a great state, but there's a lot of problems, and the only way to do that is people in the state opening their eyes to what's happening. But you need to have more movement, more engagement. To
talk about your point a little bit more, I sat down and had lunch. This was a couple of years ago with a gentleman, a white gentleman, a friend of mine invited me to this dinner. He was 80 years old and said, "Eric, this is the first time I ever sat down across the table before and had a conversation in the meal with a black person."
Oh my God, yeah, and you're like, what?
And I was like, what? Then he explained where he grew. I grew up in the suburbs. I've seen black people, but I've never actually sat down and had a meal with a black person. And we think about America as this, and I'm not shitting on America, I'm just like, a lot of us don't really interact with people who we think we do, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's race, it's gender, it's sexuality, it's age. I did an exercise for this mayor, and she said, "Eric, oh my God, like I realized I don't connect with young people."
Yeah.
She said, she was an older woman who was a mayor of a town. She said, "I don't connect with. I have no young people that I talk to."
Yeah.
And so, how do we get back to just having some common decency somewhere, like just to really expand our network, like. I'm fortunate, my adult kids live in the same proximity in the neighborhood that I live in, so they're at my house all the time. I'm with my grandkids, so I try to stay up on, young culture. But how many people in their 70s, 60s, 70s have relationships and connections with people who are 16, 17, 18 years old? Yeah,
no, and I think as the population gets older too, I'm so worried about you're going to have people who are not working at a certain age but living, maybe 30 years past retirement, and how are they going to have kind of a social life? So I think one of the things, and this is something that's been great about some of the foundation colleagues I've met, is like they've been talking a lot about how do we bring back, especially to progressive movements, like community and joy. So like there was one series where they had a concert and they had, they had a speaker, they had like Bernie Sanders, but at the same time they also had a concert and a big dinner and everyone was having fun. And so I think we need to work to create more of those civic spaces where people can engage and connect. Like, there used to be like the Rotary Club or whatever. And for young people, I'm a big believer, like we need to have like bowling alleys in every city and roller skating rinks, and just, I think if there's more spaces where people can interact. And again, I know there's so many problems, so that's not a big one to focus on, but if we don't create more communal spaces, we're gonna keep retreating into this individualism that then I think makes us sad and depressed, but also makes us less empathetic. So we need to, and that's again, I think where my culture, your culture, like a lot of cultures that are not steeped in sort of like Western individualism are very communal about, I think I was just with a group of parents. One of our board members runs a school in Trenton, and it was parents who were predominantly Black and Latino, and a lot of Latino families were saying that, yeah, we'll have family members just like living with us, it's like the whole house. And so that's one, it's great because you have generations living, but you also don't have to create then, well, you move out, now you're paying rent here. It's actually helpful from an income point of view if that's what you want. But some of the Black families were saying, but we just kind of are saying leave when you're 18, and we need to think about having more of that togetherness. And so I'm like, yeah, that's what we need to get to, is how do we bring the best parts of some of the immigrant communities we have or other communities where it is about a more of a communal relations, and bring it to kind of people who grew up in America, where I think it's kind of been like pushed away, this idea. Like I could go tomorrow and live with my parents. I would never not be welcome to live in my parents' house, and while I don't, it's provided me comfort throughout my life. I've never felt like I don't have a place to go, and so I think just that's a small example, but I think if we can take more of those things, it's really beautiful in other places how people look out for each other. I think that's to your previous point too. It's like we got to get back to that.
That's not a small point. That's a significant point because some kids don't have that experience.
Yeah.
Like it's one of the things that the joys and pain. One of my adult kids move out, one moves back in, but we bought the house and said, make sure you never have to worry about a place to go. Then this is my second marriage, and when I got divorced, I moved back to Philly, and I never, wanted my kids to ever go through what I went through. Like even if they get married and move on, what if the marriage don't work out? They have to have a place to come and say, you know what, I can always go home.
Exactly. And you probably know this, but like that security is like when people talk, parenthood and building the security from when they're kids, like these are things you layer on, and like then kids go through life with this security that other people don't have, and that, these divisions of things start to happen at such young ages. So things like that, they are important.
I spent years feeding the homeless, and people don't know how easy and how quickly it is you can get homeless. And so I know the urgency that I had. We put our home in a family trust for that reason. For that home will always be there.
Right.
For my 4 adult kids, my grandkids, that's the home. Right? So they never have to worry about a place if something happened. Because we all go through, as my best friend say, we're all lifing.
Yeah.
Like you never know when something's going to happen. A shift and a turn like that can change your life trajectory forever.
Yeah, and that's what we want to do. We want more families to have that kind of, that's the generational wealth that is great, where it's like, it's not just about the money of it, it's the security, it's that togetherness, it's all these things that I think people don't think about when they think of even owning a home, like how important that can be.
Well, how do we get people to think about that, Samra?
Well, first we have to give them the freedom to think about that, so that they actually aren't just working, 3 jobs to make ends meet. But I think it is trying to get people to think you can, again, I feel like sometimes when you ask me these questions I sound so cheesy, but it's like you can do it. Like you can do it. Like you don't have to just think of your only opportunity as something that's limited. It might be your first opportunity, but that's where privilege, it helps. When you have privilege, you're able to think of this limitless world, and then it's up to you to get there. When you don't have privilege, you're automatically starting with limits around what your potential is, and that makes me sad. I don't want people to walk through life that way, but I see it. A lot of the folks I worked with coming home, just thank you so much for even talking to me. I'm like, what? No, stop. You should not think that way, but I understand why you think that way. So I think it's we've got to let people believe it, but this is where I don't want to lie to people, So we all have to work towards a world where that's actually true. And I think that's where we have to push government. We have to push foundations, business people. Is that true? Could somebody with a felony conviction come in and become the CEO? Be honest, particularly if they're Black or brown. Probably not. So I think it's we have to give people that hope, and we have to force ourselves to push everybody around us to make that hope actually possible.
That's the contradiction that we struggle with in this country, and I think internally too. We don't like to wrestle with the fact that we are a contradiction. And it's okay if we recognize it and understand it. So let's talk about leadership for a moment, because you brought up this topic in terms of, are we really telling folks who coming home they can get jobs? What role does leadership play in that, Samra?
I think leadership, I always think about
what is your definition of leadership?
I think leadership is about first of all, like modeling the behavior you want people to be. So if I want people to be kind to each other, I should be kind. If I want people to work hard, I should work hard. So I think there's a lot of modeling that. I think in the places where I've actually had to really be a leader, you have to have a strength about you, like, and allow yourself to maybe take some of the hits. So not, you should never push your team out in the forefront of the firing squad. You kind of stand out in front. And so I think, there's times for any leader where you've had to like take it a little bit more, and it's hard to do. It's hard to admit defeat or admit failure. I think that's another big part. Like I will always be like, I messed that up. Like, and I think there's a hesitancy sometimes.
Why? Why are people hesitant?
I think people
they say I fucked up. So what's wrong with that?
Well, this is this country though. It's like because people are mean to people who mess up like that. Like it's like you messed up. We're gonna put you away for 20 years.
Away, yeah.
They've seen where like that doesn't work for me, but like you have to create a safe space where it's like I actually respect you more when you tell me you messed up because I see that you're self-aware. I see that you're trying to improve. When you're just like, oh, it's great. Oh, we do this. Oh, we do that. We're great. Then I'm like, like nobody's like that. Nobody's perfect. So I think that but in order for people to feel like they can tell you about their mistakes, you have to create a space that's trusting. So I think that's a part of leadership too. It's talk about your mistakes and then create a space where mistakes are a way to move forward, not to just hold you down. But it's a lot of those things. I don't, like making a big speech, all that, like that's just who you happen to be, your title says. But the leadership part is really about like the real work with people. And I honestly, obviously the impact work is great, but I do love like seeing people who have worked for me like shine and grow and like move forward, and knowing that even a portion of that could have been attributed to like me giving them time or support, like that really makes me feel good.
So to come into the grips with being ready to say that I fucked something up is like there's an insecurity there, right? Because how we're going to be perceived, right? And this is where leadership for me is really like people really being sure who they are, knowing who they are, that their mistakes is not who they are. It's a moment in time, and giving people that space to do that. That's why we had this podcast, right? To really talk about real issues in terms of being human. And being human is complicated.
Absolutely. It's complicated, and you kind of just have to give yourself a little grace. Like,
because if you don't, nobody else will.
No, exactly. And it's hard because sometimes you want to like be perfect or have the your best foot forward.
I used to think that. I used to I gotta do this right. Perfection is an illusion.
It's an illusion, and it'll drive you crazy, and it will make you feel bad because like you're always. I remember there was a time in my career where I would see people around me and I'm like, well, they're this or they're that, and not so much I was wishing them bad, but I was like, why am I not where I need to be? And like a little bit of that can be motivating, but too much of that is not healthy. It's like, forget that. What do you want to do? What do you want to be? And then pour yourself into that. And I think it has to be less about trying to get to like just a destination, but like the journey itself of that destination. Like people have to become more excited about that.
I'm laughing because I hear you, and like, and this is where we don't have the space to be human, right? We think there are perfect relationships and perfect marriages. No, the fuck they ain't.
Yeah.
Like that's not reality.
Yeah.
Like you grow and you mature, and those relationships evolve and transition. If you're two mature people really wanted to stay in a relationship, but sometimes it's good the relationship ends, right?
Yeah.
And that's across all spectrums. It's across industries, right? There are times when you outstayed your welcome with a particular job because you've been there for years, and you're shocked all of a sudden when they're letting you go. Like, well, you've been there for 20 years.
Yeah. Or like when you want to leave. Like, I think people get comfortable where it's like there's this comfort, but like sometimes you have to push yourself. The only way you get to the only times I've gotten to like the next place is when I've made kind of a scary move, like where and you have to do that a lot more. I mean, again, everything should be done with like thought and calculation, but you got to take risks, and sometimes those will pay off the best. But if you're just stuck in a zone, I think that's where we end up.
U2 says you got to get yourself together because you got stuck in a moment and you can't get out of it. U2 is one of my favorite bands.
Oh, okay.
But I was talking to a friend of mine, and I said, Bob, let me ask you a question. I'm turning 58 this year. What do you wish you know? Now he's in his 70s. I said, Bob, what do you wish you knew at 58 that you know now? And he told me, he said, Eric, one of the things you want to do is always be open to change.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
What do you think about this?
I think that's like spot on. You have to be open to change. You have to.
That's risky though, right?
It's risky, but like, I guess I always look at if I just stayed where I was, kind of did the old thing. Like that's not a life. If we're gonna live till we're 100 allegedly. I just don't want to be doing the same. I don't want to. For the record, don't off me at like 75. But it's like, do you want to look back and say, I didn't try that thing, I didn't do that thing, like that? That would make me upset. Not, I had a totally peaceful life that was really boring or really the same. And again, some people that might be it, but I think almost everybody should step out a little bit more and break through. Then that breakthrough might be, living in a city, it might be moving outside, it might be trying a new job, whatever it is, but you have to push yourself to like not just accept what's right in front of you. Because I think that, it's just, there's so much more possibility. And again, people who have been able to succeed the most, I think, whatever success is, oftentimes have a perspective that's like beyond, what they grew up with or what their immediate, situation was.
One of my biggest things in my life now is like, I don't want to get towards the end of my life and say, I wish I would have done that. While I'm healthy, fairly healthy, knock on wood or something.
Very healthy. I just say you're almost 60. I was like, oh my goodness.
I don't want to look back and say, I wish I would have done that. I wish I'd have done that. And sometimes it's risky. Sometimes there are some risky things, but what the fuck? Like, you don't, depending on what you believe, you got one life, and make the best of it. And something you said that it took me a long time to realize this, Samra, that luck plays a lot. I didn't think that years ago, but yeah, I got lucky.
Yeah. And I do think, it's luck, and then I feel, hashtag blessed. Like, I'm like, oh wow, but like even this job, like most people who work in direct service, it's very hard to become a president of a foundation. And I feel really lucky, and it was hard for me to take the job. I was leaving a job I loved, that I worked at for 11 years in a totally different thing, and I just was like, I don't know if this is the right move. And then now I sit back and I'm like, I love this job, and I feel so lucky that I got it, and I feel so happy about it. But it's even remembering, like, I was like on the fence. And so you just have to, sometimes it's going with your gut, sometimes it's just like the universe will work out the way it should, and sometimes maybe you make a mistake and it isn't the job you wanted, but you kind of have to put yourself in those positions to even have those choices.
What do you tell a young person today starting out? You've obviously been successful in terms of your career. If you had a young lady starting out, what would you say to them?
I would say learn as much as you can. Like, try not, even if you want to be a doctor, even if you know what you want to do, like put that aside and like spread what you want to do. Like I told you, I was an econ major. I have no business learning about, the modern history of Iran or whatever, but those are some of my favorite courses, were things that had nothing to do with what I ended up doing for work and what I even do now, but they meant the most to me. So I think a lot of it now is like learn. And like, I will say with my family, who I love, a lot of it was like get good grades so you can get into a good college. Yeah. And so I didn't really enjoy learning until I was in college, where I was around just so much information, but I wish I had like enjoyed learning earlier, to be like, this isn't just about getting an A or getting into college. This is actually about like, there's a real benefit to like being knowledgeable and learning. And I think that's for all young people. And again, it's my biggest concern for them is like, don't just think about how you can be a YouTube star and it's about making money. Everything, that's not what it's about. It's really about learning. And the more you learn, the more you become a really developed, comprehensive person who then has a lot more choices.
It's so funny you mentioned that, because I grew up the same way. High school, I struggled in high school. I hated reading and writing. I didn't enjoy learning until after high school, going to college years later, and just like, wow, how did I not like this, right? What can we change as society to get folks? I think high school is a hard time, because you have all these outside pressures, right? Get into good college, get good grades. And some kids don't actually really enjoy it, to your point, until they actually get into college and start learning, learning a little bit.
And this is, I think, a thing, again, I talk about a lot, but like the privilege of it all, like I think when you're in a lot of immigrant families, it's like they came over, so they're like, you need to succeed here. Mm-hmm. So there's that fear of not succeeding, so they might push it more into, learn, I mean, A's, but I think if you can just take a step back, I actually am a big believer in, development for children starts like in utero. And so I think all this work in New Jersey and other places around maternal health, around early childhood education, like it's so critical. And if you have single parent households who are working all the time and can't read with their kid, that's immediately putting them in a disadvantage. So that's where we need to like provide more support, because the more you can do those things early, like if I'm actually not a good reader, my kids are great readers. And it's because it was like, I was just like, you're gonna do this. And so I think starting early and then understanding where people don't have that ability to start early, how can we, government, support to create that opportunity? But I think it has to start even before high school, this like love of learning.
I remember being in Athens, Greece, looking at the Pantheons and looking at, where Plato and Aristotle, and I almost started crying. And my wife's like, what's wrong? I was like, this is why poverty shouldn't exist. Every human being should be able to travel and see the world. And that's so sad that we have folks who haven't traveled outside of their neighborhood.
Yeah. I love those programs that take, kids from certain neighborhoods to like the woods, to camp, and just, my childhood, I don't think other than, a couple trips, it was mostly traveling the U.S. In like a minivan with like 9 of us. But I really saw America and saw the beauty in it, like, Yellowstone, Yosemite, like all, there's a lot of nature that's really nice. And that makes me really sad when people in certain communities don't even get to see that part of things that are nice, and just the peace that you can get by being in certain places. And the travel thing, I think, what is it, like almost half of Americans don't have a passport?
Yeah.
That's the other thing, is like this obsession with America, we're so great. It's like, and there's a lot of beauty and a lot of impressive cultures. It's not just like, oh, you go there and it's something from, the 1500s. It's like, even now you can see a lot of really cool things that we can learn from.
Yeah. What do you think a question that we should be, or conversations we should be having right now that you don't think we're having?
I think we tiptoe around race. And when I say we, I'm saying on the more progressive side. I'm not even talking right now about conservatives. But I think that there's like this paternalism around not talking about the things that we think are off limits, and I think it's at a disservice. Like even this conversation I told you where I was meeting with the parents, I was just listening. It was such a great conversation. It was so honest. Sometimes I was like, oh my gosh, is this okay to be saying? Because it wouldn't be something that people would sanction, that's like okay to, like, it's not woke enough or whatever, but it was really honest, and I learned so much. But I feel like there's not enough spaces where we can really dig into what is really happening in certain communities, in my community, in your community, and how do we get past those problems? Because I think we're very entrenched right now racially, and I think it's we need to get past those things to really find solutions.
It's interesting.
But it's hard.
It is hard. Now, I forgot to mention this to you when I emailed you. One of the final questions we ask on the podcast is, what is your favorite quote and why?
Oh, I'm going to botch it, but it's a Michael Jordan quote, and I'll give you the gist of it, and then everyone can Google it. And it's something like, I've taken 3,000 shots. I've missed the game-winning shot 3,000 times. 500 times I've been entrusted to make our team win, and I've lost. I've failed over and over in my life, and that's why I succeed. So look it up. I botched it, but it's a very good Michael Jordan quote, and it's like, I'm a big basketball fan, not a Bulls fan, but Michael Jordan I do think is the GOAT. And I think just someone like him, he's been entrusted to take the shot, and he's missed. He's taken shots and he hasn't made them in. Like, someone that good has failed, but that's why he gets up and he succeeded. And I think it fits with what we've been talking about quite a bit.
Why does it resonate with you so much?
Because I think I don't run from failure. I don't want to fail, but I understand that it's part of getting to the best part of yourself. To be the best you can be, you have to be okay with taking that shot, with trying that thing. Those are hard things to do. They take courage and bravery. Like I like watching sports. Like when I see the people taking penalty kicks, I'm like, wow, that's so much pressure. Like at the World Cup when you take a penalty kick, so much pressure on this person. And they and like you have nations cheering for you, and they make it or they don't. But to take that shot, to have that pressure on you and to do it, like I find that like beautiful, where it's like the courage that exists in people. And again, there's so much more courage than sports, but like it's one that everyone can relate to. But when I see people able to do that, that means a lot to me. Like we have to have courage. Like we are not going to fix these problems by just the status quo. You have to have the courage to do the hard thing, to try the different thing. And so I think that's why it resonates with me, this idea of like
something you just said a second ago just shook me. So profound. I don't run from failure.
No, I failed many times.
That's very profound, Samra.
Yeah.
I think many of us run from it,
Yeah.
afraid of it.
But you're strong. I can tell you're strong. And I feel like, I'm sure when you can have the courage and you see people gravitating towards you because you have courage, it makes them stronger. Like it's really like a mutually like just reinforcing thing. And so I think that I've seen that happen. And so, I've had a lot of things that have disappointed me or hurt me along the way, but I feel like the ability to be strong and to have the courage or to not run, is the thing that saved me every time.
Wow. Sometimes our strength is willing to really admit that we're vulnerable and that we're weak.
Mm-hmm. Totally. That we hurt, that we're in pain, that we're scared. Like those are things that it's okay, and that shows you're strong. And I think this is where, not knocking the men, I think if we had more women in leadership, I think women have had to kind of, are allowed maybe to feel more comfortable with those types of emotions. And so there's this strength in that kind of maternal figure, female figure. And I feel like, that could help if we had more women in leadership roles too.
Totally agree with you.
Where you see a little bit more of that dynamic.
Audre Lorde said something that really shook me too. It's just like, women are told that they're too emotional. She said, in your emotions is where your strength and your creativity, your power is in your emotions.
Exactly. And not running from them and learning to work with them. They don't overcome you. They might overcome you, but they don't own you. But they live with you.
Well, how do you help people understand that, Sam?
Again, you have to model. Like I was like I will. I'm sure over time when we know each other, like you'll see me cry. Like I cry often because I'm like, it's emotional. Like the work we're doing is a lot. So like these attributes that we think are about leadership, being strong, not crying, not doing this, that's because it's normalized in us to have like a white male persona of what a leader is, of what the alpha is. And I think that's done us a disservice. And so I think it's like, I again model the behavior I see. Like again, I know when I need to chill. I can't like be like blubbering all over the place. But I think it's like we have to show that Eric Dobson can be president of the United States. Samra Haider can be like that. These different personality types are actually what is the norm, not just this like stoic,
this
emotionless person.
Particularly in this Western society where you got this. What masculinity is. It's such bullshit.
Oh
right?
my gosh.
Like and this is where you're right. I think we do need more women in leadership, and I think we have to be careful that we don't set women up to try to model masculinity. I see that. So like, what the fuck are you like? The femininity, the emotion is part of your strength, and men need to be. It's not that we're not emotional. We just train not to be.
Right.
We're just as emotional. I used to cringe when my dad used to say that to my mom, or say that to me. Women are more emotional. Man, no, the fuck we're not. You ever seen a man who had a broken heart? Boy, if you ever seen a man whose woman has left them,
right?
That's the worst fucking thing you can ever see.
Totally.
Like, they're fucked up, and like this whole notion that women are more emotional than men is bullshit.
Yeah, and I think one of the things if I wasn't doing this, like a lot of the folks we helped in my previous job, so much trauma. So I wish there was more mental health services for people coming home, for people of color. Like it's stigmatized, but it's like there's just so much in there, and it's like let it out, like let out some of those things. And I think again, women tend to be more free to do that, but I think men would be a lot better off if they could. There's a great group. Do you know Chino, the Returning Citizens Support Group?
Yeah.
They do this every Thursday. It's like they all meet and they talk, and it's such a great space where it's just like a calm, trusting, comforting space where they can really talk about these very emotional things that normally what it's like coming home. And I love that. I mean, they let me come one time, and I just thought it was such a great space. So there's those things happening, but we need more of that.
Way more. Now we have to end the podcast, but the conversation is getting like
I know.
We're over time. But this is the thing. Like these type of conversations is what I'm trying to foster, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like how do we, what are we not talking about that we should be talking about, right? And I think for me, growing and learning through mistakes, through failures, through running from fear, running from the pressures of having titles. Like I reject titles. Not to say that like we need a title.
No, same.
But sometimes the performance of it.
Totally.
It really, you lose yourself. And, and that I'm a firm believer in, getting back to grounding who you really are and not letting systems in society give you this illusion of who you are. And I think, Don Miguel Ruiz's book, The Four Agreements, really talks a lot about, we made agreements about ourselves based upon other people's fears and anxieties. A lot of what we are taught as a kid and we grow up, we have all these fears and anxieties, and not even ours. They're our parents or our friends or like you don't even know what you fear because you don't know you.
Right, exactly. You don't even know yet.
Yeah, and so I'm trying to foster these conversations through navigating realities, through just having conversations with folks around these issues that we can really get back to really understanding human behavior for the purposes of embracing it, Samra.
Yeah.
Like the real reality, we are a contradiction. And just embrace that shit.
I know.
Stop trying to run from it.
Right. No, I love it. I love these conversations, and I feel like, again, it feels sometimes like I don't want to read the news and I don't want to see what's going on, but then I feel hopeful when it's like we can have these conversations, or when you see this like one neighborhood doing something really cool, or just like there's little things happening that are bring positivity. And so I think that is something that we should embrace for sure.
Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Let everybody know you're drinking water. I'm drinking
water, Don't get mad.
Appreciate you being here. It's a pleasure, and looking forward to getting to know you more and just sitting down and having more of these conversations. Like this is what, a lot of folks see me in my work in advocacy and all, but this is who I am. Is having, one of the things that, and the speaker may kill me for saying this, one of the things that really started this podcast is that me and him got into a big, political legislative battle on Fair Chance and Housing Act, limited use of criminal background checks around returning citizens.
Love that.
And after we got friends, he was like, man, Eric, like, I really need to get to know you. Let's sit down and have a drink. And from that point on, we do. And I'm like, damn, speaker, you're a really cool dude. Like, nobody knows this side of you, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's sit down and talk and have a drink and have a podcast and just talk about real life stuff.
I love it.
Family, faith, community, contradiction, humanity.
Yeah.
What it's like to struggle with the tension between, sometimes I can be a great person, sometimes I can be an asshole. Yeah. And how do I balance that, right?
Absolutely.
That's what these conversations are about.
I love it. Thank you for honoring me with being here.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Hey, this is Reverend Eric Dobson, and this is Navigating Realities podcast, where dialogue meets understanding. Follow us and subscribe to us on YouTube, and you can find us on all streaming platforms.